Live again with Jazz Cabbage Cafe. We've been successfully getting on Facebook Live, I think, about 8 times now, 8-ish. And all good. We've had some really good shows, man. And we're going to have another good one today. I think a lot of discussion about hemp. Of course, we'll get into lots of things and cover some ground with cannabis at large. But we're going to have Toni and Marc Shannaquet on from Native Cultivations. Up north. Rick and I visited their farm last year. They had a successful hemp farm and harvest. And this year they're going to jump in and make it bigger and better. So we're going to hear about that process and all the stuff that they're involved in, which is also making some products and working with other farmers and working with the native in I think Michigan and other states, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll hear about that. That's cool. And we also have attorney Tom Lavigne, who of course is an activist attorney. He's a great criminal defense attorney. Civil rights attorney. He's been a great friend of our communities. He's a partner in the Cannabis Counsel with Matt Abel. And
he was also involved with hemp in Hawaii too. Yeah,
and he's also done a lot with hemp. I was just about ready to say before you interjected, but I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And Colin joined us here right at the beginning of the show this time because he was accommodated with the proper way to give him the link.
Hey, Colin.
He's on every conceivable show now too, which is cool. He's the glow. He's the glue between Reeds and Weeds. Shelly's not with us today. She's on a business trip. Reeds and Weeds, Medical Mondays, and
Planet Green Trees.
Yeah, Rick will introduce him later more, but we have a Berg here from Medical Mondays. Planet Green Trees, of course, of this show, and we want to get back in the studio cave. We're going to continue live broadcasting with video because that's just been working out really well. And but we want to get back in the studio too. That also has its advantages, I think. And just those guys are kind of struggling without the studio to be able to be open. They put out a little public mention of it. So I'm going to donate a couple of bucks, and I'd like to get back in there and broadcast and support that a little bit. That's a really cool thing, and it needs to come back. And
I'll say this about Cave Radio, and I hate to interrupt you, Jamie, but when Danny Cakes passed in the horrible way that she did, those guys were there for Ray. Those guys were there for the family. The Cave Radio broadcasting team, they treated everybody like it was their own personal loss. So tons of respect for those groups.
They put on 2 big fundraisers. I have a video of Ray playing with Tasha Owens and Kenny Olson. And it's really awesome. Maybe we'll play it on here today or next week. Maybe Ray will join us during the day today. We'll see. And it's from one of those. And they did step up and they did help out those people when needed and asked. And they've done lots of cool shit like that. I know. So they deserve some help too right now. And so hopefully we'll get back there. But that also makes me wonder too, in light of the couple of districts up north, the UP and some of the northern western areas. And across the top of the Lower Peninsula have been reopened for business under certain circumstances. And that just got underway. So we'll see the next 2 weeks or so what kind of spike, if any, there may be from that activity. It's a populated area. Traverse City's pretty big. I think a lot of people knowing that it's open are going there. So it'll be a test. People are kind of guinea pig-ish on this, but if people do follow a certain protocol most of the time, they can minimize the risk of transfer, and that's something that we're seeing there. As long as it goes well, we're going to start seeing throughout the state. I'm sure where I am in Detroit will be one of the last areas to be totally kind of opened back up again, because the numbers here are kind of the worst. So it probably works like that. In the UP, there hardly are any cases of it that have been reported. I'm sure it's there, but given the population and circumstances and so forth, that was considered a good one to get started with. But that Traverse City thing will let us know how we can kind of proceed. And in that case, I'm kind of curious where people's line is necessarily. I mean, if it's a situation, I've been going to the Western Market in Ferndale whenever we need to fill in. We're trying to get curbside all the time. When something needs to get filled in, we'll go there. And they have it set up where there's a line that forms where people have to be 6 feet apart. Masks are mandatory. you have to use the hand sanitizer before walking in there, and it's limited to a certain amount of people based on the size of their store at any one time. That seems to be the model of how, besides the appointment only type thing, how places are going to open up. I'm just curious if people are going to like stay in for a while, even though that's available, or really looking forward to it and think it should go, further, faster.
Yeah, one of the people in the chat said that there was 2 cases of COVID-19 yesterday. That's it.
Meaning that they came out of the activity maybe up in Traverse City in the opened up district. Is that what that refers to?
Yeah.
Or? Okay.
Well, I know that it's got an incubation period 2 to 14 days. So this weekend might be a little bit early for us to start seeing results of positive test results from this. But I know what we like to do normally when we start off is run around the room, introduce everybody. I'll introduce you and then get an opportunity to answer Jamie's question. What's your personal threshold about what you need to see out there in society before you're willing to let your guard down? Derek Gauci, cannabis consumer, cannabis industry watchdog. Let's see what you got. Derek, what's your personal, I need to see this before I'm going to let myself hang out in public again?
I got to start by, and I appreciate you, Rick. I got to start by telling the world I am also, I'm a professional photographer, and I run a business doing that stuff. So like that's been one of my main concerns is like, what's the safe time, to get my team back out and shooting people and all that stuff. So we're trying to figure it out and try to keep people comfortable. One of my biggest businesses, of course, is weddings. So we're trying to, figure out how to keep the love alive and keep people alive. That's our goal, man. That's all we care about, those 2 goals. But either way, I mean, we just got to keep safety as number 1. And I guess I'm kind of drifting off and forgetting your question. There's more correcting.
Well, you'll see those types of gatherings similar to, I think, to what some of the restaurants are doing. In the banquet room, there'll be an empty table between a table of maybe a family or people who are normally together type thing, or try to keep it spaced out. Mm-hmm. So it's going to change from now on, but it's going to get started.
You'll see prettier, more like elopement style things happening, like things to see, and these people going out to the sides of the cliff, and getting married, being able to be more themselves, smoking doobies, having a good time.
Cool.
See how the many creative ways that these things, emerge under the new circumstances, for sure.
And a lot of people can have a personal standard that's different from societal standard. It may be okay to walk around without a mask. I'll probably still wear a mask for a while anyway. Let's welcome a new attendee for our Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Berg Medical Mondays. He's the man, the DJ with the PJs. What's up, Berg?
Yeah. So this whole thing is like threw me for a loop, so I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not really big on going out places in the first place, like I sometimes go to, different events and everything, but I mean, shit, I personally think once, events start happening again, I'm jumping right back in. I mean, I'm not a big, I swear to God, I had this shit back in January. So
a lot of people that feel that way, that they were ill at the late last year or early this year, they felt like it might have been a version of COVID. And in some instances, we believe those antibodies might give us a degree of protection. So that's what you're thinking, Berg, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just read a little bit of an article yesterday about Canada doing research on cannabis possibly, not being able to cure it, but, tone down the effects, and, it might not be able to, fully take hold on your immune system. So
I did a report on that on Saturday that will probably air during this meeting tonight, during this show. Essentially, what they found is that smokers have fewer of the ACE2 receptor cells in their lungs, which are the cells that COVID binds to. So it's unclear whether smoking cigarettes alone or smoking cannabis together or separately would actually reduce that, but it's intriguing.
Well, and Dr. Rosania last week was saying that makes perfect sense to him. And when I was reading to him what some of the early indicators were about cannabis maybe being helpful with the virus, he said that's just the tip of the iceberg. Anything that's like this, it should be helpful for.
Jim Salame, you are a healthy guy. You are someone who keeps in shape. Home of Medicine Decriminalized Nature, Ann Arbor, an entertainer, so many different things you do. Ann Arbor is a bustling town. It's got to really crush somebody who lives in that zone to not be able to go hang out in the downtown area. What's your personal standard for getting back involved in society again?
I don't know. For me, it's kind of day to day, just from the information I'm gathering. One minute I feel like, okay, if we have events, I'll be there. The next minute I feel like, well, maybe I want to wait to see if the event occurs and wait 2 weeks and see what happens. And but I want to get back to normal. I think we've all kind of gotten used to it a little bit, and we've let our guard down as far as not being as concerned about getting it and putting ourselves in harm's way because we want to get back to normal. And part of me is for also, you know, starting that to slowly do that for society and get people back to work and get people going to businesses and, you know, Derek out for doing his photography, all that stuff. So I don't know. I still don't feel like I have all the information, and I feel like there's still more to be known. And so it's really tough to say, but those are some of my different ideas on it, I guess.
Those are very common frustrations. We're getting so many different voices telling us information about the coronavirus. We're getting official government sources which are in conflict with each other. We get individual medical professionals telling us something that sounds very logical, but then we go on the internet and there's just a whole stream of different voices. Almost every opinion you could possibly imagine is out there. And if you wanted to reinforce what you already thought, you can find that out there too. Berg, did you want to jump in on that?
No, it's like, I mean, and then people are, you know, totally believing one or the other when they totally both could be bullshitting us. You know what I mean? Like, our government is known to, you know, not be the most truthful, you know, organization. So, I mean, I don't know, man.
Well, here's what I know. Colin MacDougall thinks murdering people is good exercise. See murder, hatchet man, right hand chopper. What's your personal standard? You're a youngster. You're somebody who has, you know, that still has that believes in that invincibility, that invulnerability. What's your standard for getting back?
Well, I think it's kind of hard for me because, like, I do work from home, so I'm like, okay, whenever they call me back, I guess, to go into work, I suppose I should go with like a mask and everything and gloves. And, you know, I was reading that if 80% of Americans just wore masks for a while, that this virus would go away. And I think that, I don't know about 80%, but I think a lot of people actually would be willing to just wear a mask and keep their hands consistently washing their hands and just not touching anything, their face. And I went to Aldi, I think last week, and they didn't have that like waiting system that they used to have that Jamie was kind of talking about in the Ferndale market. And I also went to another grocery store, and they didn't have like really social distancing guidelines. One had a security guard who made sure you had like a mask and like allowed you to come in, but the other one didn't. So it's kind of weird. And those shops were like pretty close to each other. So I don't know. My dad is like a high risk patient, and they don't want him to be out right now. And so I just don't want to like catch anything. And like I'm pretty healthy, and I might not notice, you know, something that could be the COVID-19 or it even show. So I just feel it's probably best for me right now to just stay in.
You don't want to be an accidental carrier bringing home the disease to your loved ones. That's the same situation I'm in too. I have folks in my life that are vulnerable, whether because of current cancer treatments or because of age. I'm very cautious about what I do. Having said that, I went to 4 different places today before the show. So in each one of those, I wore a mask. I wore my super awesome Diamond House 1212 cannabis leaves on my face, showing it off in public mask. Thank you, Phil Vasquez, Diamond House International, 1212 seeds. Yeah. So I think for a long time, it's probably going to be each one of us individually that decides what we're going to do to protect ourselves. Because there's a lot of people out there already deciding no mask, no way. I mean, haven't y'all seen that when you go out? There are certain people that are just defiant and will not comply no matter what.
Yeah. I saw
stores and seen that. I think it's about 60% of the people are wearing them and about 40% are not, from what I've seen.
Yeah, like personally, the only place that I wear a fucking mask into is like CVS. Like, I haven't really been out. I've been working and at home in the gas station, you know. Out of those 3 places, you know, I'll wear a fucking mask at a drugstore, you know, and that's only to make other people feel comfortable. It's not for me.
Well, good. I mean, as Colin said, as long as everybody's wearing them, reduce the risk. You know, the stuff can't spray out of your mouth and nose as far if there's something that blocks it. So, and if everybody's got that, it's, you know, you reduce the risk of it being around to be able to be infected. So,
yeah,
it's pretty basic. And if we all did that a little bit more and didn't, you know, we've talked about this many times on this show, how it's understandable how people get to the point where they get really frustrated with that and don't necessarily believe it works like that and that type of stuff. Yeah. But go ahead, Colin. Sorry.
In 1919, the Spanish flu, it came in like 2 waves, and like the first wave would be around like April, March, May, and then the second wave was like really high. It was like in September, October, and there was different cities that implemented masks, and there were cities that like protested against it, and those cities that like had lifted the masks saw like higher rates of death and infection that winter. So I think that like this happens like every 100 years or so in like different ways of like, it's not always the same virus, but there was also another flu epidemic that happened in the 1830s, and before that there was tons of different cholera and what's that one disease, smallpox, that was spread in throughout the world, and those diseases are spread like through the air and through close contact and whatnot, and we're just a lot more advanced now, and we have the ability to take it out quicker if we
virus itself.
It would have been nice if we were a little bit more on top of it a little sooner from a national level, of course.
Yeah.
Hey, it is 420. Let's see if we can get a video rolled, and look how natural that was, man. You weren't even consciously paying attention, but you totally lined that up perfectly. We're gonna watch a video.
Everybody mute your mic and we'll go for it.
All right, I'm gonna keep going here. Rick, you want to start going? I'm gonna go into your news.
All right.
There he is.
Well, all right, let's try this again. Hey, everybody, it's the Cannabis News. I'm Rick Thompson.
Nice.
Let's do it. Remember EVALI? That's the formal name for the e-cigarette and vaping associated lung injury syndrome that caused a national panic recently. A study published in the Journal of American Medical Association by scientists at Indiana University found that EVALI cases were less likely in states with legal recreational cannabis industries. Here's a quote from their study. One possible inference from our results is that the presence of legal markets for marijuana has helped mitigate or maybe protective against EVALI. Nice, huh? Now, which among us, who's using cannabis to ward off COVID-19? This guy. But that's not as crazy a proposition as it may sound. A new article by Detroit-based Metro Times summarizes the research into cannabis and coronavirus. Researchers in Canada have found that certain cannabis strains may reduce COVID-19's ability to infect the lungs, as well as other susceptible tissues along the intestines and oral cavity. How'd they figure that out? It's a fun story. Those Canadian scientists created 400 new sativa strains and extracts and then tested them against artificial human 3D tissue models. There's a dozen that warrant further investigation. Those strains are high in CBD, unsurprisingly, and some strains reduced virus receptors by 73%. Israeli scientists are trying to treat patients infected with the coronavirus using cannabis. Clinical trials will start soon, and the hope is to use cannabinoids to halt something called a cytokine storm within the human body, and that's where our immune system mistakenly attacks our healthy cells. And what about cannabis as a vaccine? Maybe, says University of Saskatchewan researchers who are producing cannabis-based proteins for use in a potential vaccine treatment for coronavirus. Okay, how about smoking fat joints as a way to defeat the coronavirus? Yeah, that's a hard maybe, according to French scientists. Global pandemic data shows that in certain countries, more non-smokers were hospitalized with coronavirus than smokers were. 26% of China's adults smoke cigarettes. Only 8% of COVID-19 patients in that country were smokers. Other countries had similar findings. Nicotine reduces the number of ACE2 cells in our lungs, giving fewer places for the coronavirus to take hold and start infections. But the evidence is uncertain if just smoking in general accomplishes the same reduction. You keep doing your research. Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, signed on to a letter asking the United States House and Senate leadership to approve the Safe Banking Act as part of the latest coronavirus relief package. Joining Nessel were 33 other state attorneys general. The letter comes after the House passed the coronavirus relief package on May 15th and sent it to the Senate, included in the Safe Banking Act as part of the relief package. The act would remove federal barriers and allow the banking industry to work openly without penalty with cannabis-based businesses in states where those businesses are licensed. The proposal also includes paying for annual surveys of the cannabis industry to measure the level of minority and female-owned businesses as a gauge of the diversity of the industry, which sounds good. This is the second time the Safe Banking Act has passed the Democratic-led U.S. House of Representatives. It was passed as a single proposal last fall, but went nowhere. This effort at bundling the SAFE Act along with the coronavirus relief package may sound like the Congress is trying to combine their home and auto insurance for a big discount, but this is how Congress has passed cannabis proposals for years. In order to avoid Republican roadblocks, pro-cannabis bills, like the one that takes away funding for federal cannabis prosecutions, they've been linked to budget proposals. Now, unfortunately, the Senate Majority Leader, Republican Mitch McConnell, he's blustered that the Safe Banking Act is dead on arrival. McConnell said some pretty harsh things and even pointed out that the word cannabis is mentioned 68 times in the new coronavirus relief package, more times than the word jobs appear. The stimulus package is being debated this coming week in the Senate. Will we get the Safe Banking Act passed? We'll see. Stay tuned. On May 21st, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam signed legislation to decriminalize cannabis into law, making Virginia the 27th state in the nation to decriminalize simple cannabis possession. That law will take effect on July 1st, 2020. The bill reclassifies possession of 1 ounce of cannabis or less to a civil penalty, punishable by a fine of up to $25. Can you say Ann Arbor, anybody? Now, that happens to be the lowest fine of any state decriminalization law in the country. Cannabis possession in Virginia currently brings a criminal offense punishable by up to 30 days in jail and or a $500 fine. You know, nearly 29,000 arrests in 2018 were made in Virginia for cannabis offenses, 59% of the total drug arrests in the state. They can use a break. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the Cannabis News. I'm Rick Thompson. Thanks for listening. Watch me on Jazz Cabbage Cafe every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. and on various other programs during the week broadcast here in Michigan. Have a great Saturday. We'll see.
Yeah.
Hey, that was really cool. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Cover some ground. So Rick doing the news, I think originated on Planet Green Trees years ago. Maybe there on terrestrial radio, probably with Steve Green before that. Yeah.
Yep, we did the medical marijuana radio show on WTKG, WDTW, and WFNT, and I started the news there. But then it went directly to Planet Green Trees. You're right.
Yeah, and it's been going on for a while, and it's always been well received, and so it's a cool way of doing it. And it hasn't gone on for a little bit, so it's coming back into the fold that way. So that works too.
Good job, Rick.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to do the news broadcasts every Saturday. It is an irregular broadcast, which means sometimes it's more frequent, sometimes it's less. So especially when we have news coming up, if I get 4 or 5 stories that I feel strong about, I can always throw on a nice shirt and go ahead and do one of those in the middle of the week too. But it's nice being able to have Jazz Cabbage as a vehicle for the news, especially when it's already wrapped up and produced like that, and we just have to push play. Makes it so much easier.
It reminds me. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Bird.
Meat though. I didn't see any taco meat during that video.
I know. I was hoping at least one more button, like.
Listen, I know what my fans want, and you know what? You got to leave a little something to the imagination. It works.
Nice.
Ask Deb Young about Tan in the Base. She'll tell you a story.
Yeah. Also, I want to ask her about where her threshold is. I think it's going to be a little bit more restrictive than some of us. And she makes it back on today. I'm not sure. She said she might come on a little bit late, but we'll see how that goes.
How is everybody? I got a question for everybody. How is everybody with smoking? Like, is anybody passing a joint?
I haven't been around anybody else.
I haven't. Last time was when we were up north with Darren McCarty doing the promotion for the Botanical Company and the slapstick show at the hotel later on that night. There's a couple of groups of people that passed a joint around, but that was March 15th or something like that, 14th maybe.
14th, yeah.
Yeah, and the morning after,
I haven't done it since then.
Met some folks and then headed straight home.
And we talked about this before. I do it a lot. I have done it a lot before then. But we talked about even before the pandemic became a thing, that today's situation is much different than the times when people were sharing a joint. There's enough cannabis to go around that's easily attainable. Everybody kind of can have their own joint, smoke what they want, and all hang out still. And so I don't really mind that coming into fruition anyway.
It's a really badly kept secret that Jamie and I sometimes burn cannabis while we're driving in automobiles, and typically when we're driving, it's 2 joints, one for him, one for me. I do that with almost everybody.
Chuck Reeman it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, didn't you guys name it after one of our heroes?
Yeah.
Chuck Reeman it. Yes. Chuck is very famous for having enough cannabis that when he stands in a circle, he just hands one to everybody that's there. Yep. So they can all light up. He's quite the generous fellow.
And his name consists of 2 verbs.
I know. I always like to do that. Yep. And usually like a second and a half after you say that, there's chuckles and everybody laughs, right? Yeah, that's good.
That's even funnier because his name is Chuck and they're chuckling.
Yes. Oh.
Never end.
It just goes on forever.
Oh, the puns are piling up here. So at what time are we going to receive our first caller, Jamie?
Well, any time. I told them jump on anytime you want, but the actual scheduling would be the Mark and Tony coming on around 4:45, so just under 15 minutes, and then Tom coming on after 5 a little bit. But
okay,
Colin,
we sort of stepped on you. What were you trying to say, Colin?
I said we should have Chuck Reem on one of these days.
Well, totally. Yeah, we continue to do. Everybody who's been on Hash Bash for sure is immediate kind of a, preferred list to a degree to try to get more and more of, the individual segments. Hey, they're going to start coming in now. I say we get rolling with them, but yeah, you're right. I'd like to maybe get Chuck and Tim on the same day.
Yeah, bring them on.
So I think we're going to get Mark. We're going to get Mark and Tony, and I think Roach is going to be jumping in on the host panel at the same time. So it'll be Medical Monday in full force with the Cabbage. And we're going to talk about some hemp though, which you guys please feel free to be part of the conversation, man. If you have some questions, these people from Native Cultivations, not Native Roots, as I mistakenly wrote at one point, Native Cultivations, and they had a garden last year and had a harvest and were productive with it, and they had planned on coming back bigger and better this year. And now that we're in the spring, and I'm sure there's been some work done, and kind of learn about that. Plus, what's going on with this emerging situation at large. It's pretty interesting, man.
There are photos of their outdoor hemp garden available on Facebook. You can check out while we're doing the interview too.
Yeah, why not? That'd be really cool. And Rick and I visited the garden they had last year, couple weeks before harvest, I think, and that was really cool. Some of that shit looked, I mean, if you just walked out of the forest into that field and didn't know necessarily that it was a hemp field, you'd think you were around some really awesome cannabis coming up, getting ready for.
Very exceptional in Michigan. The organization, the openness, the progress to have an outdoor cultivation that's successful in the state. Mark and Toni, thank you for joining us on Jazz Cabbage.
Hey guys.
How you doing?
There they are. Hey.
Yes.
So where are you guys right now?
We're sitting in the car.
If you can say, I mean, there might be some secret location or something like that.
We're sitting right outside of HTG, which is the garden supply company that everybody goes to in Traverse City.
Okay.
There's one by me in Taylor. I think.
Yeah.
So you kind of answer the question by being there. We were asking everybody what your level of comfortability is. You know, as some places open up, are you going right to the stores? And how is it set up there? Are they making everybody have a mask and stay 6 feet apart and that kind of stuff, or what's going on?
Yeah, it's curbside service. So, the people come to the building. We don't allow them into the building, but we do, take their orders, fill their orders, and then we pretty much load everything into their vehicles for them.
Okay.
You know, retail's had to become smart to adjust to this coronavirus crisis. Is this curbside something you think that maybe it's a service your customers would appreciate even after the crisis is lifted and they can come in full ways?
Absolutely,
I do,
think.
but there is some that really need to be addressed with the employees, because there's a lot of heavy lifting and carrying that you wouldn't normally do. So,
that's true.
There would have to be some issues addressed with it for the employees also.
Right.
Yeah. For us with Native Cultivations, we're just, we're able to do social distancing while we're planting our stuff. And, we're that far apart from each other, but the families, they all live together. So, it's really been our family that's come out to help us with all of our stuff.
Have you had a difficult time recruiting workers, or are you just using the same folks that have always been loyal to you?
Yeah, they're family, so yes, they're always been loyal to it.
Make them do it.
Okay. And there's a couple of guys that aren't family, but the seed guys and the processing guys, they're all ready.
Go ahead, Rip. Sorry.
I was just going to ask about the weather this year. We've seen late frosts. We've seen some crazy stuff, this flooding too. Has the weather impacted your planting schedule as far as your hemp crop goes? Because this is only the second year we've done hemp in the state, so some of it may still be a little experimental.
Yes, this year, we want to get it started as early as possible. And if you don't have a climate control space, it does tend to prolong your starts a little bit longer. So this year we did start way earlier than we did last year, because the license didn't come out so early this year, but we did get an earlier start. We did have to heat our greenhouses for a while until the temperatures came up enough to where we didn't get frost. So I'll know next year that question. I'll be able to answer it better, because this is really the first year that we get it started as much. And, I would have liked to start about, 2 to 3 weeks earlier than I did, but, the weather was what it was.
So last year, it was in doubt whether or not there could even really be an officially licensed season for a long time, but then the state was able to issue some licenses, and people got started at a time that you would not have chosen to, had as was the case this year. So you had kind of a shortened season quickly. You did get a crop in, it was productive, but your plans were to come back bigger and better this year. So what's an overview of what's going on now? Where are you in the process now, and what's going to happen at harvest?
Yeah, we've set up 3 greenhouses. Last year we didn't have greenhouses. We didn't have any genetics. We had nothing really set up because we didn't think the season was going to happen because everything was so late. So when MDAR decided to give out the license, it was hurry up and go. So I had to pick out genetics. I had to I had already studied a lot of stuff on farming techniques. I just didn't know a lot about reliable genetics. So once I got a good handle on reliable genetics, and I kind of know how to do some of the breeding myself. So me and some of our friends from Hempire Seeds, we did a breeding project. So now we have seeds for many years to come in the future, and we will be perfecting that part of the business as we go along. So the outlook for the future looks really good on hemp. So
Mark, we talked about I'm sorry, Jamie, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I just want to say that you've been growing hemp now. And obviously everybody here knows, and everybody, if they don't, should know that it has tens of thousands of uses, and there are many varieties and that type of thing, and lend themselves to different things. So to get started with, a lot of people are doing a lot of hemp varieties that are good for smoking, for getting making concentrates from CBD based stuff, and maybe for some foods and stuff like that. But there's room for Michigan to grow in the emerging hemp industry with like the other types of plants that lend themselves well to like fibrous material for products and all that types of stuff. And the sky seems to be the limit. Where are we kind of in what's going on? Is there any of that happening?
There is at small scales right now. The infrastructure in Michigan is not what we would like it to be, to where we could go full on, so we're trying to, get the infrastructure for the grains and the textiles in place so we can really move forward in the industry.
So iHemp was talking about that at their last meeting. They were talking about needing somebody to come in with $10 million as an investor to get a decorticator into Michigan. Winona LeDuc has a hemp farm in Minnesota, and she does everything by hand. So we kind of follow her lead.
That's very labor intensive.
That her family is a small tribe, and they come out and help with the labor. That's what's kind of happening with us.
You mentioned earlier, we talked about having an outdoor grow, but you also mentioned greenhouses. The role of the greenhouses this year has been to start your hemp seedlings so that when your ground's ready, you're actually starting from seedling stock as opposed to seeds. Is that the role that we're talking about with those greenhouses? That's the role that sets this year apart from last year too?
Yes, it prolongs the season, or not prolong, but it makes the season longer so we can get, better yields on our fields, as long as your amendments are right and, you're taking care of them how they like to be treated, you should end up with good yields at the end, as long as the genetics are what they should be.
I want to let Jamie jump in, but 10 million doesn't seem like an insurmountable number for someone who really wanted to invest and get in on the ground level of Michigan's hemp industry. It seems like empire in the making. Jamie, what'd you got?
10 million falls off of Jim's dresser in the morning.
The guy, he's dripping cash.
Well, we have a couple of big organizations that you guys know about that we're talking to make that change, to make that happen. And they, one of the facilities is an old sewing plant. So
Nice.
that's hoping to be changed.
It's so perfect. I mean, Michigan unfortunately went through, some downturn with the manufacturing sector for a long time, and there's many of these situations around the state where there's an outlying agricultural area. There are manufacturing places that haven't really been in operation for anything in a while, and all the storage and places to sell it and manufacture and all that stuff. So
You have to have buildings that have a certain thickness of floor to be able to resist vibration, to be able to resist the weight of particular machines. And Michigan just happens to have a ton of those places sitting around unused right now.
Right.
To me, it's the perfect match of unused resources and a brand new demand for resources.
is there much discussion on taking a social equity approach in the emerging hemp industry? Any proactive work on that front, similar to what there might be in the MRTMA, or maybe better? There's room for improvement there probably, but is there any discussion on that, focus on that?
Just the only thing that I can see happening is USDA moving forward with getting plans from all the states and all the tribes. But I don't see, the FDA is looking at how it is to ingest it for CBD usage. But other than that, I don't see any more rules and regulations like MMMA or MRMA.
So right now
it's a different thing altogether. I just kind of wondering if there's certainly it could be something that a group or a focus of an organization that wants to be involved in an emerging industry could be taking. It would be nice to encourage that or make sure that's known that those opportunities are out there. This guy's got
I know I'm one of the biggest groups that I know of that I'm part of. And then Comorn. He has the association for hemp down there.
The Michigan Hemp Industries Association, yes.
Yeah.
Planting green trees.
Those are the two. Yep.
Right. So you had a harvest. Was that primarily harvested to get smokable flower, or did you use the hemp for different purposes? And if so, how difficult was it for you to find someone to be able to broker that to the proper end place?
At first, it was quite a task to find people that were willing to buy. There's a lot of stuff needs to be tested and it needs to be compliant with MDAR's rules, and there's a lot of things that go along with it. But once you make these relationships with these people, they know what your product is. They tend to come back. So in the future, I see that happening more and more with different groups, lots of people. So it's here to stay for sure.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. Did you just have hemp for smokable flower, or did you use part of your hemp to accomplish other uses of the plant?
We did Bubba Lineage for our best smokable flower. It was such a beautiful plant, and we did breed those. We bred Nuvo. We bred Bubba Lineage to Oregon Cherry, and so they look even stronger this year with the Bubba O and the Nuvo O. But yeah, they're incredible. So yes, we did for smokable flower last year, and we have extra plots going for smokable flower this year. And then we extracted all the way through to a distillate, and we used our own processor for that. So it wasn't a problem getting it extracted because we have our own system.
It's not at a huge scale, but it was enough to supply all our products that we're branding and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's an additional license that you can get too, right? So at some point, talk about what the licenses are available, if you don't mind, so people know what you're working on.
There's a grow license, which is $100. So you can grow hemp, but you can't really take it off from the farm to be sold if you don't have the processor's license. So the processor's license is $1,315. So if you're going to be in the whole thing, you should really get the the processor's license and the grow license. So you're looking at about $1,450. And in the near future, I hear that they're going to be raising those prices or adjusting the prices somehow. So, and I think it's going to be a little bit higher than what it is now, but we'll see. MDARS are the ones who decides on those issues,
those numbers. But yeah, the license for grow this year is 100, but next year it's going up to $1,450 just to get a grow license. That's
not including the processing.
That's not saying anything new about the processing license. So we still have news coming down to us from that.
Yeah, makes sense.
For next year.
So that works.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
But we use the distillate. The distillate, when it comes out of the plant, is like in the consistency of corn syrup, only it's really a lot stickier, obviously. So we changed that form into a tincture using a high proof alcohol. So we have that for some autistic people that come to us. I use that tincture every morning, so I have a good dosage coming into me of CBD, where your recommended dose is 350 per dose 3 times a day. So that's a good intake for CBD to start affecting your system. So we used that, and we changed it into a tincture, and then we also changed it into a lotion that will actually get rid of rashes, and then it also gets rid of the itch from rashes. It helps with eczema. It helps with pain. So this cream is just phenomenal. So I have a professor from Hillsdale University, and he is a search and rescue ex-Marine. And so his name is Joe Killam. I did some survivor classes with Joe Killam because he's a survival expert. So he knows all of the health benefits of a lot of different plants. So what he did is he took 10 acres and he planted things like mullein and just things that you can make medicine with for antiseptic and all those creams. So he put all of these together on 10 acres and made a salve out of all of those flowers. And so we're putting that together with our distillate to make a salve.
Nice.
And it's a super salve.
So I have a couple questions. Do you feel confident that your entire harvest has a place to go when the time comes, and if everything works out well for you?
This year looks a lot better. Like I said, those friendships that we made, those connections that we made are really going to be, there for us in the future. So
nice.
When we started going to the seminars with you guys, the first things that we learned was to build a good team. So our team is phenomenal in the things that they can do.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So when you get testing done, I know that there's the very straightforward legal definition of what we're dealing with here, and it's got to be 0.3% THC or less in order to be
right. It goes like
by definition
to 0.399.
Right. Along with that whole thing, are you seeing does the testing also show the further terpenes, the flavonoid, the other components of the plant deeper into the plant? Do you look at that?
Well, it depends on where you get it tested. MDARS, they're really worried about THC. They're not worried about any other cannabinoids in the plant. So as long as you're, compliant with their ruling, that's the only testing you really need. But we do take it further, and we go to the state and get it certified by the medical, by the medical certified labs. So we know what other things are in it for sure, because we don't want to pass anything on to our customers that we wouldn't want ourselves.
Jim's got a question. Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Hey guys, it's great to hear. You guys are really passionate about what you're doing with hemp. I'm so glad to hear about it. The question I have is, tell me about any evasive critters out there. I assume that you guys are outside. What's your biggest threat out there? And then any surprises on like maybe badgers really loving hemp or something? You find badgers in your
well, mostly most of the animals like the cannabis plant when it's very young and tender. Once it gets to a certain point, it gets very fibrous. So animals don't like that fiber because it's very hard for them to chew and eat. So it'll get to a point where they might bite it, but usually if they bite it, they bite the tops off. So it kind of helps the farmer a little bit. Not always, but a little bit with topping, which adds more biomass to the plant. So nothing really eats it per se, but pests and bugs and stuff like that. So, bugs are really the biggest issue when it comes to the hemp. So
there's a hemp borer.
There's all kinds of bugs. There's, there's hundreds of bugs that will indulge on the plant. So you have to really, be aware of what you're using, what kind of bug you're treating. We use a lot of essential oils and natural things because we're, we want to be totally organic. We want to be organically certified. So there's certain things that you can and can't do in this process, to get organically certified. So we try to do as much organic stuff as possible for sure.
The fun thing about that question is that we are going to be working with the Michigan State University. We were going to work with Purdue, but our girl left there, so she's not there anymore. But we're going to knock those plants around and put sticky things underneath there so that we can see what kind of bugs are coming out on that. And then we'll send it off to Michigan State and they can give us a good idea of what we have.
That's a common trapping technique in order to determine insect populations, right? That's really cool that you're going to be able to do that for hemp. Probably their first exposure with hemp.
Yeah, because there's an emerald borer that it burrows itself into the stock.
It's a hemp borer, not an emerald.
Oops, I said emerald. I meant hemp. But it burrows itself into the stem and it'll block nutrients from coming through. So
those are unwanted.
Yeah,
unwanted.
That's an unwanted.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot of there is a whole lot of really good bugs, but there's more bad bugs out there than there is good.
What do you do about the borer when you see it? What's the treatment?
Essential oils, natural nematodes, fungus, and these stuffs, the fungus and the nematodes, you do not spray on the plant, you spray on the ground, and then the bugs travel through it, they eat it, and then it affects them, or the nematodes eat the larvae or the eggs, and that really kills them off quite well.
So you telling me you use shrooms to
No,
I'm just playing.
No.
I mean, those are happy bugs. If you're giving them some,
I may have used shrooms in the past.
I may have or may not have.
I cannot confirm or deny. So
you have the happiest garden in the entire Northland if you're putting magic mushrooms out on your compost.
But you did mention that a fungus is used in pest control.
Yes.
Right. And the nematodes, when you talked about nematodes, they go strictly into the roots to stop the production of larvae from that area. Is that right?
Yeah, nematodes are like a microscopic bug themselves that eat the fungus, or not the fungus, the larvae and the eggs. That's what nematodes are. They're an actual microscopic bug.
We see nematodes oftentimes in indoor cultivation systems. Nematodes are frequently used with hydroponic systems or flood and drain systems, or systems where you have reservoirs of water.
Mm-hmm.
Are they a protozoa?
Actually, I need water to activate the nematodes, so I put them through my drip irrigation.
Ah, that's sweet.
Yeah. So one of our fields has the drip irrigation system set up, and the other fields are all natural. So they have their like trees and mounds, you know, where you make a big basin for it and then fill it up with water.
Nice. Do you ever see keeping the whole cycle in a greenhouse?
I do when it comes to smokable flowers, because in northern Michigan, our grow season is only about 90 to 100 days. And in those 90 to 100 days, the last probably month, we get a lot of moisture in northern Michigan. So it causes problems with mold and mildew. So if we had it in a place where we can control the climate a little better, we would never have problems with those molds and mildews. So yes, I do see it. And, you know, eventually, if we want to, you know, keep all medical, we're going to have to move it all indoors anyway, because the hemp pollen will eventually degrade your THC in your medical plants over a period of time. So, you know, that's a big issue with a lot of hemp farmers and medical farmers where they don't think they can get along, but there is plenty of ways of doing that. Yes, moving indoors is ultimately the best way of doing that, but there is other options.
Do you need male hemp plants specifically to make some products or to get some,
it depends
texture?
on what. Yes, it depends on what which way you're going. So if you're doing CBD, CBG, you want to no males with your plants. But if you're doing grains and textiles, you want males with those plants, you know, to get the seeds, because you need a male, you know, you need that pollen for the female to pollinate to get those seeds.
Would people potentially, although, I mean, depending how big the field is, it might not be feasible, but is there a way to pollinate by hand so you don't have to just throw the stuff in the air? You can go by and brush it on.
Oh yeah, there's a way, but you know, when it comes to big farm fields of grains or textiles, it's probably not feasible, because you would be out there the whole time pollinating stuff.
And the goal is to make sure it's uniform pollination across the whole field. And it seems like by hand would automatically mean some areas would just get more attention than others too.
Yeah, probably, you know, and it would be the cost of labor on something like that would be pretty, you know, pretty high.
But you wouldn't be, but you'd be reducing the risk. I'm not saying that it's feasible, but you'd be reducing the risk then of the stuff.
Oh, sorry.
You would be.
We're on a call right now. Hold on, Hannah.
Okay.
It would be reducing the risk of the pollen getting into and getting in on other, you know, gardens that are not trying to be.
Yeah, there is certain things you can do. We call them buffers in farming. So other, you know, like other flowers like sunflowers and, you know, stuff like that will collect all pollen. So if you have those buffers in between your fields, it does help with keeping the pollination really low on your fields. But
although it would be really cool for somebody to have the term pollen boy on their resume, though. I think that would be, you'd be really helping someone out, you know, inspire conversation. I was a pollen boy once.
Yeah, it would make me laugh for sure.
Hey, so we'll get to him in a minute, but we were just joined by the attorney, Thomas Lavigne, who also has a very rich background in hemp from an activist side and from a practical knowledge side, and in Hawaii as well as Michigan, and maybe points in between that he can describe.
Well, let's introduce Tom to Mark and Toni. Mark and Toni actually had a successful hemp farm in Michigan. You're already familiar with Tom Lavigne, though, aren't you, Mark? Toni?
Yeah.
Oh, probably. Yeah. I'm not great with names. I remember faces. So
he's
good to see you.
Partner with Matt Abel in the Cannabis Counsel. He's been on the board with them. I Legalize and worked with all the. He's an activist and a criminal defense attorney and civil rights attorney, everything. So he's just been great for our movement. And as I said, had some concentration in hemp along the way, so that works out well for this conversation. What did you do in Hawaii, Tom? And welcome.
Well, that was my first bar exam. I went out there, and on the day after I passed the bar exam, I filed a lawsuit against the governor of the state of Hawaii and a state senator, a state representative, and the mayor of Honolulu, who were all accepting bribes from the Japanese Yakuza to steal land to develop the Royal Hawaiian Country Club, where Clinton played back then. Well, we were the guys who forced them to sort of curtail that golf course and make it into a target, more of a target course, rather than just blow over what really should have been categorized as rainforest, but they recategorized it as like Class A ag. And then all of a sudden they allowed golf courses in Class A ag. And there was some questionable foreign campaign contributions. And the Federal Elections Commission made them give all the money back, and it blew wide open. At the time, it was a pretty big amount of campaigns. It was the same group of people who were later accused in the Clinton household, White House, of what was it? The Lincoln bedroom renting of the rich Japanese guys. Yeah. Eugene Lum and those slime bags.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep, that they would take some kickbacks from some rich foreigners to be able to sleep in Lincoln's bedroom and in the bed Lincoln slept in. Right. Yep, that was a big scandal back then.
Yeah,
now I think it's just what Trump does normally. So
Right.
That was interesting. And that's where I read Jack Hare's book in Hawaii. I was a young lawyer and picked up a couple marijuana cases. I was spending more time on the Big Island. That's why I read the book and was inspired really at that point, and became an activist to a degree out there, and really sort of an advocate to everybody I could talk to about it. And it's just been fascinating to see it finally come along and be legalized federally. Is really a great progression. I'm still pissed off about the 0.3% bullshit, you know.
Yes.
You know, so just a point about that. In the language for a while, we had under the state MRTMA, we did have it at 1%. That got changed last minute back to the 0.3.
in an early version, not the version that people signed a petition, but in a prior version, yes, it was 1%, and that would conform to some international standards. That 1%.
Yes.
So that would make us more uniform with the rest of the world.
In an older Michigan legalized version, wasn't it like 3%? Like, just.
I think so. Maybe repealed
like
today
3%.
Or no, that was even more simple. I forget.
Not 0.3, it was 3.
I think there were some things we proposed initially to have in the petition that I think Marijuana Policy Project just said no. I remember someone saying your decimal is in the wrong place. I remember that.
So I don't see, like, at some point it should be any real issue. You just decide I'm going to use these plants for this industrial purpose, and then you just fucking do it, you know. And
especially if it's being made for plastic or something.
Yeah, unless it has to be low for like a CBD cigarette, which is a specific thing, then you really need to pull that off. But otherwise, you know, you're going to manufacture it anyway. Who gives a shit?
The standard for non-human consumption should really be like zip, right? I mean, come on. If it like you said, if it's going to make plastic, it's going to make paper. If the seeds are going to feed human beings because it's a superfood, then who gives a rat?
Well, the U.S. is the only one who really cares about that 0.3. You know, Canada, they don't really care about what the point is, because they'll just take all that THC right out of the product.
What's the point? They say. Perfect.
Yeah.
The United States says 3.
Yeah, and every other country remediates it right out of the plant. So,
well,
I was happy to see Michigan's MDARD did raise that in their comments to the USDA in January. I was on a panel with Gina up in Midland. We had a town hall, their cable TV station there, put something on with hemp, And I was kind of pushing Gina. I was like, well, the MMFLA is already has the law that it could accept it in. It's you guys that need to change it, you know. In other words, if it tests hot, why not sell it to a medical marijuana facility processor, you know? And sure enough, that made it into her letter to the USDA, not only challenging the 3%, but also to be able to, rather than just destroy order, you know?
Yeah.
If it tests out, it must all be destroyed. It's just absurd. And I think it helped that there are a bunch of hemp farmers in the audience. And, you know, I was emphasizing total loss, you know, all these dollars, all these farmers in the audience here would lose all their money. And Gina was kind of like, but, you know, she's good. I like, you know, and I'm glad that she put it in that letter. She didn't have to.
That's
But
awesome.
maybe we'll see something. And some U.S. Congress people are pointing to the 0.3%. It's been brought to their attention too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that was
could
the
be a
question
change.
people had was, can we put it in metric? And how do we put it in metric?
And for those that don't know, metric is the system that regulates the sale of medical cannabis and throughout Michigan. So what we're talking about is taking hemp that wouldn't qualify as hemp because it's greater than 0.3% THC content, and just treating it like medical marijuana and still treating it as a saleable component, as opposed to just having to destroy it because it's not compliant with the hemp regulations.
Yeah, to at least be able to process it into something that could pass under whatever the circumstances are would be a lot more practical. And we just take so long to get there with cannabis-based issues. The word marijuana or cannabis, whatever, gets attached to whatever you're talking about, and for some reason you can't be like practical or sensical about it.
Yeah.
Go through a bunch of extra hoops. And
because when you extract into a distillate, you're gonna increase your number anyways.
And there are ways you can moderate all of that too by changing components of the distillate too, to make sure that your dosing is compliant, that you're really looking more like hemp and less like cannabis. There's so many ways to fix it. But again, we're in the infancy of this program. Letters like the one that Tom helped inspire to write, activism like Toni and Marc, making sure that their voices are heard by the people who make decisions. Some of these early on issues will get resolved in year 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to point out, and I don't know why they don't consider this, is the science of it all. When you have a plant and you cut it, it is still ripening and it's still going to change. Just tomato changes. I don't think that's ever taken into account when it comes to hemp, especially.
They just want easy numbers. They want easy benchmarks to work with. They don't want complicated things.
Yeah, you satisfy the bureaucratic process, and then they move on with their lives. It seems
within 15 days of harvest, and they try to just do that.
I've seen hemp raise a half a point from harvest to dry.
Sure.
The action of losing water, decarboxylates the plant itself, so it does artificially raise that, or not artificially, but actually raise that testable level. And Mark and Toni, you guys test while your cannabis is in the field still, right? So you can monitor its THC level during its growth cycle?
Yes, we do use gastrocartography equipment to make sure that we are compliant when we send our test in for MDAR's compliance test.
Cool.
We've said we said
Sorry.
MDAR, that's Michigan Department of Agriculture Rural Development, for those people that don't know. Go ahead, Jamie.
Have you had any testing that determined that you were too hot on at least some segments or something of your harvest?
Yes, at the end when we turn stuff from biomass to distillate, all your cannabinoids raise up because you're concentrating, the flower. So yes, there is points where you can make it hot, yes, but like I said, we can remediate all that stuff out of there. We're just looking for that to be feasible for everybody, not just
But we were never hot in the field, and we passed our testing to harvest.
So is that tolerated then? So you pass when you're supposed to, just because there's a natural process that boosts those numbers. You're not held responsible for that. It doesn't become then.
You're right. you're right. I have a test that says that it's 1%. So, I mean 0.3%. Sorry.
Still, I mean, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of
So I
the
have that.
regulations, so easy to make a technical error. And then, like we talked about, the catastrophic effect Tom was describing of having to lose your entire harvest, or perhaps having to lose, even more than that. So
Well,
Yeah.
that would, a lot
Yeah,
of farmers would lose their farms if they had to destroy, over 20 acres of hemp. They would lose their farm.
Hey, so Tom, we didn't ask you, just and we're asking everybody who's come on the show today, as things start opening up a little bit, obviously up north has begun, and if everything goes well there, it's going to continue. Where is your line? I mean, if that place is open up, are you jumping right out there, or are you gonna wait for a little bit? Are you anxious to do it? Do you think it's already past due? What are your thoughts?
I'm cautious, I've kind of put this whole pandemic thing in a historical perspective of, the Black Death and shit, I mean, this isn't a hoax. This shit is for real. And historically, we've been able to come together and beat it in the 60s. The Soviet Union, the US scientists teamed together to, when we need to be coming together, we're being divided. And it's very unfortunate in my view. I think that, I agree that the economic impact is a real thing too. And I want, places to reopen with the social distancing. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive, a lot of businesses can't work remote. Luckily, in my business, we are able to. So I shouldn't be too judgmental because I'm lucky. But pandemics, until we have a good treatment, it could wipe out a lot of people. So I'm more on the stay at home, stay safe side of the spectrum. Just following my governor's advice. And I kind of look at it like, okay, the legislature came down with the game plan and the rules that we're all going to play, let's say a game of football. And Governor Whitmer is our quarterback. And the plan is a cogent public education plan on social distancing to try to stem the spread. And the people in their game are like tripping the quarterback. And I'm sitting over on the bench, wishing I was in the game. I'm pissed off. They're in the game. They're like tripping our own quarterback, these Republicans by undercutting her communication. I mean, the play has been called. We got to communicate social distancing and wearing a mask. And then these guys are going to get in the way of that. It's too late. They passed the law back in 1950. She's now the executive. She's implementing the law. I mean, I disagree.
Well, it was challenged, and the judge said that the challenge was meritless. So for clarity, the governor can do that under these circumstances, not for the flavored vapes, it turns out, which I agree with too. That wasn't the same kind of an emergency. This is how we learn where the parameters of the government's authority is. We learned that sometimes she steps over the line, but sometimes she's acting within the line. And when it comes down to it, the legislature needs to be, a group of linemen, right? Yeah. As the analogy Tom's using, instead of bitching about the play that's being called and trying to run something different, you have to follow what the quarterback's called. And when she says hike, everybody's got to be moving in the same direction with the same idea and the same program in mind. And when they want to do their own thing, then it's just chaos. It's like the Detroit Lions actually playing football instead of being off this season. I mean, if we look back on it later,
freedom of speech, I'm all for challenging government. You know me.
No, we hope that it's wrong. We hope that it's not that bad. Really, we all want it to not be this big deadly pandemic that it is. And
I don't want
it turns out not to be as great. But let's not just assume that it's not at any point. We've seen what's happened around the world and in our own state now, and so let's
I've had clients die. I've had a client's mother die. I've had a good friend in the movement. She had that little 12-year-old girl and her mother who died. I mean, it's
Isaac Robinson, who's state representative Isaac Robinson, who's been to Cannabis Counsel many times. He was a friend of ours, friend of the movement. Jolly guy, always a smile.
Yeah.
Huge, gentle, gigantic guy, but always happy and very, very understanding, very wise, and taken too young.
He was our best legislator.
Last week, I had my senator, Morris Hood. He was a Democratic floor leader. He passed away from COVID-19, and he was also a really good legislator on our issue, and he always introduced it and sponsored it too.
That's right. Hey, so Tom also participated in our digital hash bash, which was like a month and a half ago now, around there. And
how fun was that?
That was a lot of fun.
And we've been trying, and Rick made a lot of great, like, smaller segments of people's presentation, and we're gonna play that. We're gonna take a break. Mark and Tony, I hope you guys want to hang on. You're welcome to be here for this show, participate in the conversation. We will get back on some hemp stuff for sure.
Right on.
Yeah, please, and even if we're not talking about that, I know you guys have been around in the scene and part of the community in many respects for a long time. So any thoughts on anything we're talking about, feel free to contribute. But in a minute here, we'll play Tom's presentation from the Digital Hash Bash, and
I was trying to imagine I'm on the big stage with lots of people, So if I'm a little over the top with the dramatics, don't hold it against me.
Your speech was great, Tom. You'll watch it.
You were a star, man. You were amidst the best. You had your shit together, unlike
I followed Chuck Ream, Chuck Ream.
I know. I was like, I had to follow Chuck Ream and Tom. I was like, what do I do for this?
That'll get your blood going. That'll get you up there.
That's right.
So anytime, Derek, if you want to toss that on, man. Not to be confused with tossing off.
Derek's got that slouch. I was wondering.
I saw some under the desk hand stuff, so I wasn't sure.
All right, so everybody will mute our microphones and watch the show.
There you go.
Mute, Gauci, mute.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. I'm excited to introduce our next guest. He, of course, is attorney, brother, and one of the partners at Cannabis Counsel, which is one of Michigan's premier cannabis law firms providing legal services to cannabis businesses throughout the state. As I said, he's been practicing for over 30 years, and with his esteemed colleague, Matt Abel, both Tom Lavigne and Matt have been leaders in both the law and in the advocacy for reforming the laws regarding marijuana. And it's my great pleasure to introduce brother counsel, Mr. Thomas Lavigne.
Hello, everybody. Hey, it's great to be here. Digital Hash Bash. In these amazingly earth-shifting times, I think we can all learn from the challenges we faced, the huge obstacles we overcame to legalize this natural resource, this Mother Earth healing plant. Now we face this pandemic, and we can draw from that strength, from that togetherness, from that brotherhood and sisterhood that we have. One of my favorite songwriters, singer-songwriters, Bill Withers, just passed away. The writer of Lean on Me. You can all lean on me in these times. We've said that before. We've accomplished great things. We're moving forward. We will accomplish great things. even coming out of this pandemic situation. Now, the crisis has really brought to light the defective healthcare system that's been handed to us. And I believe that huge leaps of progress can happen because we're facing such a perilous challenge. We have to brainstorm, we have to come together, we have to put down our days of pragmatism where what works, where the compromise is the truth, and pick up our dialectical materialism, the scientific method. Let's look at the facts. Let's do and plan forward. For many years, I was involved in consulting using Japanese management techniques, trees, Russian innovation techniques. And one thing that we would do in product development context is you would look into the future. And by looking into the future, you can plan for these. One study we would do is failure modes and effects analysis. You get a bunch of smart people in the room. You consider all these potential failure modes and rank them in terms of, what could be the most devastating. Wouldn't you think a pandemic? No, but that's central planning. That's not the way that we operate. And I think it needs to be more so, is my point. And using a scientific dialectical materialist approach as opposed to the modern, postmodernism of, that's just your opinion. No, let's get to the facts. Let's apply science and continue to solve problems. Cannabis has remarkable properties. We could have been healing a lot of people over the last 100 years without exposing them to the drastic side effects that Big Pharma has handed us and has devastated our people. How many people has that killed? The opioid crisis. Whereas cannabis is an alternative to that, and yet cannabis was not recommended? How dare we, as a medical system, allow that to happen? It's mass malpractice. And for us to disregard herbal medicine as an approach altogether, herbal medicine. It's all part of the same thing, as opposed to these freakish chemicals they throw at us. And so in moving forward and the importance of healthcare and the treatment of our people in mass and the availability of medicines that heal, not medicines that kill. We demand medicines that heal. We reject your medicines that kill. And amidst this mass pandemic, this global crisis, I pray that we put down the politics, we put down the absurdity of pragmatism, where only what works is what's truth. We have to compromise the truth a little bit because this bullshitter over here, I might need to make a deal with him in the future. We're done with that shit. We need to sit down with the smartest people in the room, apply science, solve problems, and move the ball forward. Let's get her done, people. We face this peril, but I see a brighter day, and let's demand greatness of this country. And let's reject the mediocrity that was behind prohibition in the first place. I remember the slaughter of Rainbow Farms, Roland Rome and Tom Crossland, Brandon Peoples. There's been some real suffering, death. I'm reminded of Jerry Duvall in federal prison still today. It's unacceptable. It's a cage of pandemic hotspot. It's exactly the opposite of physical distancing, and they're forcing it upon them. So let's move this ball forward, everybody, and demand greatness and lead as we know how to lead, people. I love you all. Hash Bash 2020.
So good. Good job, man.
That was fun.
Tom, you got to be proud of that. That's a moving speech. We reject your medicines that kill. I don't know if you could see me, but I've watched it so many times. I knew exactly when you were going to say that, and I was saying it with you like you're a rock star, and I'm repeating your lyric, man.
Yeah. Yep, you were getting into it, which is always cool, man. That was great. And you were all set up too. There was no like, hey, unmute that, or you have to hit that button so that the video comes on type of stuff. You were all set up, ready to go. That was perfect. So I agree with you, man. Science just, or the logical approach just isn't like utilized in lawmaking. That's not what is the concern. If we've seen, that's why Michigan ranks amidst the most corrupt governments. It depends on who's getting to somebody, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. We saw everybody jump on board with that stupid pregnancy label. That wasn't something similar. I asked some people who I really like and respect, why did you vote yes for that? And I was told, well, it's just like on a, on an aspirin bottle or something like that. And it's not. That thing
It's
really
a warning label they've asked to put on medical and recreational marijuana packages that warn potentially pregnant females about the dangers of cannabis use, Jim.
Yeah, man, but it gets like it's written in a particular way that is over the board. That's really
Just
kind of
3 weeks ago, a big medical study reviewed all of the studies looking into the effect on pregnancy, and they found no correlation, if anything, something positive.
Mm-hmm.
The Jamaican study is the most famous, the longitudinal one where they follow them for like decades after birth. And
I know
excellent study.
I know plenty of women who have have smoked during pregnancy to, ail certain, just stomach aches and everything.
yeah,
Cramps,
there's lots of
nausea,
things.
for sure, yes.
And that was one of my concerns. The warning could potentially scare some people off from something that's working for them. Which is it's to say something similar like, hey, consult your physician, which is on an aspirin bottle or Advil bottle or something like that. Fine, but this thing goes out of its way to describe, potentially horrible consequences if you do this or that. It's overboard.
Who would do that?
Yeah. So, Mark, Tony, what do you want to say?
Mark said, who would do that?
The legislature. That's who would do that, right? People that really never wanted cannabis to be where it's at right now. They were reluctantly dragged to this place kicking and screaming. And this is the way a child with his tantrum, tries to continue to lash out even after he's been sent to his room. So we've seen the legislature, several things, THC in driving, this infatuation they have with labels and requirements, our over-the-top testing protocol here in the state. Lots of ways that we still have work to do. Nobody quits. Everybody fights. Lots of cannabis law reform left for Michigan's future.
Yeah, I think that parents are responsible for their kids and they're capable of finding natural solutions for them. I don't think that they should be scared of this research and experimenting with this medicine on their kids, because it does work for them. It works for animals.
When we have Amish communities that completely reject modern medicine and we allow them to do that, it's their right because of their religion. Why would we not extend that same right to the regular citizenry, the non-Amish people? We are all, under the same banner,
Hey,
right?
Speaking of that, Tom, aren't we supposed to have that right under the First Amendment? Shouldn't that just be automatic?
Yes, we are. It's a First Amendment right, this right to religious use itself. And I took a case Brandon Barnes, U.S. versus Brandon Barnes, up to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit after the Hobby Lobby case. So as you'll recall, the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled in Hobby Lobby that a bunch of fat cat churchgoers can deny health care to women based on their religious beliefs that against abortion. So the U.S. Supreme Court said, yeah, because the religious, what's the act? The Republicans had passed an act federally, which kind of went backwards a couple decades in terms of where the case law was going. They wanted it back the old way. And then Hobby Lobby kind of firmed that up. But when we went to apply that more, giving deference to religious rights, to marijuana, the Court of Appeals wasn't willing to go that way. They screw us, but they let the Hobby Lobby do whatever the fuck they want to do. Unbelievable. Just made no logical sense, this opinion. Unfortunately, the client, didn't want to take it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't even know if they would have taken it.
So this now it makes me want to divert just for a second and get your thoughts on what's going on with the frackers and the 180-day rule and the potential rulings in that regard, or the existing ruling and the potential rulings in that regard.
And just to explain to our listeners, there's a requirement in Michigan, 180 days. You have 6 months to collect petition signatures, and that's it, even though that's not necessarily the way that we read the law. So this anti-fracking group has challenged that regulation.
Yeah, and that law was made during the Snyder administration after both the MI-Legalized group and the fracking group began collecting signatures. Yep. It was assumed by policy that was the limit. Well, Tom, if you want to explain any of that, feel free, but I'm going to take too much time on it.
I mean, they pass a law after the fact, and they wanted to apply to us two groups, and they did. And the thing is, this Frank Kelly, who was our Attorney General for decades, a real rock star, legal scholar, honest, straight shooter, he deemed this 180-day idea unconstitutional. He pointed out that the whole idea with petition gathering is if you have a legislature that's captive to big money, then somebody without big money can go and collect signatures and change the law. Well, if you got to do it in 180 days, you got to have big money. So this makes no sense. This 180 days went totally contrary to the whole public policy between that. That was the reason for ballot initiatives, to let the small guy get something done legislatively without, now it's reserved to the DeVosses, and then they're, is that really the intention, that big money should be the only ones able to get shit on the ballot? It just doesn't make sense. That 180 days to require it to all the signatures to be collected within that 180 days is not what's required. It's and even if it were, it like Frank Kelly said, it's contrary to the public policy. It's not.
That new law was just a new statute. It didn't change the state constitution, and that's where the argument is of having up to 4 years to collect signatures between gubernatorial elections, it says, which is a 4-year period.
The fact is true that we've had recent years where there was 4, 5, 6 different statewide petitions appearing on the ballot. That's a very active form of democracy. And this 180-day rule does put a crimp on that ability for us to directly affect lawmaking in our lane.
And I hope that fixing the gerrymandering issue also helps to fix the need for having to have like 10 different initiatives on the ballot every time.
Too bad the courts reversed that. Initially, it was going to apply to this election or something.
Right.
But now we got to wait till the next cycle.
Yeah.
That was bullshit. But at least
I think so too.
Well, again, the system resists change. It doesn't give power up willingly. And this is another example of how, we are trying to take back power as the citizenry. And those who have power are just not going to make it easy for us. They'll challenge us legally every step of the way.
Hey, Tom, was that based on the U.S. Supreme Court just saying that that they are not going to intervene in the states' choices on how to plan districts or something like that? Or what was that rejection of fixing it this year based on?
Oh, yeah. I don't know the
They couldn't
technical
convene the
why that
people in time, right? They couldn't get it together in time for this election. Was that it?
Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't apply.
A separate case. It wasn't necessarily directly connected to the new ballot initiative that just passed. It was based on how it was illegally formed in the first place, and that it should immediately be. And one judge did say this should immediately be taken down and redone. And
yeah, really, it shouldn't have required a statutory amendment, because how is that an expression of democracy to allow this gerrymandering bullshit? That, I mean, just make it in a logical way, not an unfair playing field. I mean, it goes down to fundamental fairness of any contest of two teams. It was made fundamentally unfair.
Again, you might not agree with the popular decision, but if many people are weighing in on it, then it's easier to take instead of just a small group of people figuring out a way to kind of control.
But it's a tool of government, though. If you look at the city of Flint, the way that the school districts are so stretched out and twisted, it's all to try and achieve a racial harmony. They change districts in order to aggregate a certain number of people and try and. It's just nonsense. The games that they play with statistics and demographic data, it's all got some subtleties to it. So as far as I'm concerned, make off great big squares, make sure that they're approximately equal, and that's what you do, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
So yeah, that had a constant. I always thought the courts should do it, we shouldn't have to wait for a ballot initiative. Any honest judge should have ruled that it was unconstitutional a long time ago. Then we started seeing it here and there around the country. A couple courts did rule on it.
And I wish the U.S. Supreme Court would have taken up we had a legitimate constitutional question. We had barriers to the procedures that we couldn't overcome. And then with people don't know, they was set up. We were in part blocked by this policy of the Board of Canvassers themselves and how you can revive the signatures that were more than 180 days old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's by demonstrating that the person was registered to vote at the time of signing and then at the current time. And you had to do that with each individual clerk of the 1,700 municipalities, villages, and townships. But then there was this electronic database that came into play in the late 90s via internet and stuff like that, and that took that place so that you didn't have to do all that stuff. But we were still told that we had to do all that in order, which you can't do, which is impossible. That means like a petition sheet which is original from whatever county it was written from, it's got to go to each municipality by whoever signed it in that county. So it's prohibitive.
It's a standard that couldn't be met, which is essentially why they said it. The legislature makes rules. That's their job. They don't like it when the people make rules outside of them. The legislators really don't like the cannabis laws because we did them on our own, both the legalization and the medical. So they try to make it difficult, and this is one of the ways. And that whole board, remember the running Republican? Remember we had the canvassing board. And Tom knows what I'm talking about. And it's a 4-person board, which is so strange. You normally want to have an odd number, but in this case, it's a 4-person board. So it normally 2 Dems, 2 Republicans, and one.
Well, there's one director who's a deciding vote. Yeah.
In one meeting, one of the Republicans was absent, so it was 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. Realizing he could be easily outvoted on all of the things in front of the panel that day, the 1 Republican suddenly found out he had an emergency, and he got up and ran straight out of the room.
Ran out of there.
To bring the entire proceeding to a halt, so nothing could get done because there wasn't parity.
And that would have changed that policy in question and would have made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. What a jerk that guy is. I call him the running Republican in my analysis of that.
And then after we would have had to have gone to every clerk when we would have brought it to the Board of Elections for confirmation. They wouldn't have gone to every clerk. They would have used the database that we proposed using in the first place, because that's the way that it's done.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was done properly through the electronic database, assuming that since it came in after that, it takes the place of all that. But that didn't wash with that group. They wanted to stick to the details in order to be prohibitive.
Oftentimes people look at the result we got with the legalization proposal and they forget all the tribulations we had on our way there. Jim, you wanted to comment?
No, I have a question. Can you guys remember there's maybe 2 other groups that also wanted to legalize cannabis for the state back then? And remind me, will you?
Repeal today, of course, was 2012.
Yeah, but he's talking about the Michigan Responsibility Council, MRC, or something like that.
Yep, I think that's it.
And then the
guys from Ohio.
And then the oligopoly one
Oligopoly.
that Tim was supporting. Tim didn't support it because he likes that model necessarily, but he thought they got the money. They will at least achieve some type of legalization. So he jumped in on that one. But we could do better. That's, you know, that was an ongoing issue, an argument, even when the national groups came into Michigan. We can do better sooner. So we're not just going to settle for some shit like that, man. So
during the petition signature collection time, Colin will tell you there were several petitions out there from different competing groups, and it was sometimes difficult to make sure that we were getting our petition signed. Isn't that right, Colin?
Yeah, I was gonna say abrogate was another one.
Oh yeah.
I totally forgot.
Yeah.
Who wanted complete prohibition, and they wanted a
Yeah, we all want that, but it's just they wanted to change the Constitution, and they wanted to take it to that extreme right away. So a couple of knocks without any resources.
So that was our repeal today 2012 motion, was a single one sentence constitutional change.
We learned a little bit, I think, from that process, though. You know,
I think we educated the public a lot.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. Yeah, collected 50,000-60,000 signatures all through, or something like that, all through volunteers. Talked about it a lot. Got a lot of media stuff. Remember one time, Tom, you and I were on somebody's show on WEMU. I forgot what Lynn Rivers show or something like that. I forgot, but anyway, we're talking about it then. That was repeal today stuff.
Yeah.
Tom had a great backpack, which had a big extension that came out from the top with a sign above his head that said repeal today, sign here. And he would walk through crowds of people at Eastern Market and other places. And Andrea, his lovely wife, would be there with the petitioning boards, and he would be the barker to bring them in, and she would wrangle the signatures. It was quite memorable.
Yeah.
Some clones for me, some CBD clones.
I have a bunch of plants.
You have some plants? How much?
Tony, it looks like Tony's having technical difficulties. We're sorry about that, Tony and Mark. Hang on as long as you can, but if you have to ditch, we totally understand. So.
Yeah, you can go out and come back in if you need to. Whatever you need to do, try to hang in as much as you can.
Yeah.
Looks like you're pretty good right now, though.
So, Tom, how's Cannabis Counsel been weathering this whole COVID crisis? I know you said you're working remotely, but are you seeing a decrease in the number of cannabis cases being presented for prosecution, or are you seeing an acceleration, or what?
Well, we do mostly business stuff, except Sean with the office. There is still a little bit of, on the driving cases.
Okay.
Then there's some issues with dispensaries breaking the rules a little bit. So we have hearings on those sorts of compliance things. And, but fortunately, MRA has been open, and we've been able to correspond and continue to file applications. And some localities have been better than others to deal with local governments. We deal a lot with the municipalities, but we were able to have some Zoom.
Hey, you know what? Just for a second, Tom, sorry, but Tony and Mark are going to head out. They're having a hard time keeping a stable connection.
All right.
They're going to melt if they don't get off very quickly. But
we are having difficulty, technical difficulty.
Hey, but it was great to hear about last year and this year's hemp garden coming up, and that's just beginning. I mean, it's just getting started here. This whole thing has got so much potential.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see your next the cultivation this year. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to see it.
See you guys.
Maybe we can do it again.
Have you out.
Oh yeah. We'd like to come see it again. We'll have you guys back on to report too. Thank you guys very much. All right.
That was really an awesome segment with Tony and Mark. Really pioneers. This whole first year of hemp in Michigan has been a learning experience for everyone, and they're right there with everyone else.
They've been trying to do things since early on and working with these other others, these other tribes and other states and stuff like that, or who already got it going in some regards and want to get whatever it is. They all try to get information and get things up and running early on. Put together some of the early seminars on it, and been involved with like Michael's group, as they were saying, and stuff like that. So yeah, they've been in on it early and often. So that's really cool to hear from them.
We did the Michigan Hemp Conference. I think was the first hemp conference in the state, or one of the first hemp conferences in the state. And I know that Mark and Tony were there. And when it comes to something like this, you have to get out. You have to seek the information. You can't expect it to flow naturally to you. And if you don't do the homework and if you don't do the research, then you will be the worse for it. And talk about some people that did their research and made smart connections. Really, you'd like to see good people succeed. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I remember going to a meeting in Ann Arbor, and they had Gus Rosagna there and some other people, and they really were doing their research and making the right connections and getting themselves set up. And here they are, season 2. So we'll check in on them later and see how it goes, and hopefully be able to make it up there and see what they've done.
That'd make a good TV series. Hemp Farm, the reality.
Hey man, Tom, I don't know what's going on with Tom, but his description of what was going on in Hawaii sounded like a movie to me. At least a good made-for-TV movie.
And a much more friendly place to film. No
Sure.
Snow. So
unless you seek it, there's mountains there you can go skiing if you want.
There than it is Detroit.
Yeah, Hawaii is a lot more expensive than it is Detroit, but I mean, Hawaii.
Yeah,
Hawaii is fucking awesome, man. I've had the fortune of being there a couple of times. I would like to go back.
Never been.
I recommend it.
Yeah, we're doing great.
Yeah, it'd be cool if Tom came back in. I didn't mean to scare him off. I just wanted to make sure we recognized our guest before they had to leave. He might be there. He is. He's sliding back in. Tom took advantage of the opportunity and sifted off for a second or two, but he's back. So
Good to see you.
Tom, we've got a lawsuit currently going on. The Cannabis Counsel and Camoran Law is involved with as far as suing the state of Michigan to remove cannabis from the schedule of controlled substances. John St. Clair is a plaintiff in that. Michigan Normal's attached to that as well. What's our current
MMA,
status
Josie
of that?
Scoggin.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, a lot of friends of ours. What's the status?
Yes. Well, it's kind of stalled right now with COVID. I think we faced a summary disposition, and I think, let me see. It's kind of stalled right now.
Court of claims or appeals?
It is untenable.
So is there a way to then just redo it, repackage it, and even add in the new stuff with the MRTMA, which makes it even a stronger case? I mean, that particular case that we're talking about is just based on the MMFLA, isn't it? Wasn't that before the legalization even was official in Michigan?
And the MMMA,
Right.
just even the section 2B of the MMMA, the finding that this has medical efficacy, and that and then you have 7E, the superiority clause.
Yeah, and isn't that stupid?
Trumps the fucking thing in the first place. We could even
Trumps all laws.
Isn't the Schedule 2 thing really stupid? It says Schedule 2, if being used medically, which was just followed Schedule 1, which says it has no medicinal value at all.
I know.
If you're going to put it in Schedule 2, that nullifies Schedule 1 on its face. I mean,
right. Because it, by definition, would have to have no medical.
Right. I mean, it's really fucking stupid, the lengths that we go to in this state to stop, just moving forward sensibly with cannabis.
Well, and Tom, they want to treat drugs differently. They want to treat precursor pieces versus completed pieces separately. So, you have cannabis plants, which they want to treat as Schedule 1, but cannabis flower used medicinally, which they want to treat as Schedule 2. They do the same thing with other origin species in other drug laws, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. With like opium and that sort of thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just thought, man, repeal today. Remember, we're closing in kind of on toward the end of the show, but you remember the announcement to lift off that campaign took place in Detroit at the
Park Davis building.
At the Park Davis building that used to process cannabis for medicine.
How cool was that?
Yeah, that was really cool.
The
I think
old-
Jim mentioned that the other day. Actually, Jim had that. Yes.
Yep. And
What a
that's
great
right.
thing.
That's where I met Joe White originally. I
Okay.
believe. Yep.
Good old Robert's Hotel.
Yeah.
Now,
And that was 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I know 2012 is when we collected signatures for that ballot, but I don't know if we announced it in 2011 or whether it was 2012.
oh yeah.
I think it was 2012, right before the signature gathering started.
Yes, that
Okay.
makes sense. Yep. Yeah.
And of course,
Bob
our old,
Alexander.
Yep.
Remember Bob Alexander coming to those big
I do.
100 people rallies, and he'd get us all organized, man. He was
Chuck Ream said about that guy. He's like, that guy's worth 1,000 people.
yeah, he
You
was
know?
amazing.
Yeah,
And he's unfortunately, I believe
he
he's
has
passed
passed.
away at this
He
point.
has, yeah. But he did start. He was in on the beginning of starting the progressive group or caucus, maybe, or I'm not sure the official thing, but he was involved in starting the progressive movement officially in Michigan.
Yeah.
And
There are a
he
lot
trained
of
people really well on collecting signatures. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
there are a lot of people that have their efforts have been unheralded. Bob Alexander used to make us call him different names, and we couldn't use his actual name itself
Yeah,
because he was
Chuckles.
worried. What's that, Tom?
Chuckles.
Yeah, Chuckles was yep.
His wife is employed by the state, and he thought there might be a harm to that job.
So-
There's connection to this stuff.
think
Which there
Bob
were,
Henry
man.
was-
You know what? There were people like Gersh in the old days was arrested just for collecting signatures.
I know.
You know, many years. So it's risky.
The
just
shit
to
we
be,
went through.
You know,
The people nowadays, they walk into the industry, they think they got to throw some money at MRA and they got to do this, and that's how cannabis is. No, motherfucker, no. It was tough. They shot your dogs. They robbed you. They pulled you over. They harassed you. They hung out at dispensaries and followed patients as they left. They surveilled. They would park a car there just to screw with your enterprise, man. There are so many ways that we were victimized in the industry. And then as a consumer, come on. I mean, and African Americans, come on. The way that they treated African Americans for decades and continue to still do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too, Tom. When we brought it up before, there was an article in Metro Times just recently saying that some of the same tactics using cannabis are still being used on
Still happening
disproportionately
today.
on minorities. Right?
Yes, still today, there's disproportionate enforcement of the DUI laws that we're still stuck with, you know. Still happening. So we have to deschedule this.
So is there so maybe a return of this suit just in a different form with some new information? Does that make any difference?
I think so.
Well, good. I mean, we do what we need to do. That's
Yeah.
Is that be more successful after the election of 2020 to see if we get a more favorable situation in the way that the courts are arranged?
Potentially.
Yeah.
also, it's being looked at legislatively too, and it makes sense. I mean, we've acknowledged that there's a lack of logic, but it's pretty straightforward. We don't treat it like a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drug in the state, and it's inappropriate for it to be there. And in other states, they automatically fix those inconsistencies as part of their processes. We don't do that here, so we have that conflict.
But we have a Republican-controlled House and Senate here in the state of Michigan. So when they fix something, it's typically not a complete job, nor is it the type of fix that we, the people, would elect them to do.
Exactly.
Hey, Tom, anything you want to make sure that you get across? We're going to start winding down the last few minutes.
Okay.
So please.
The new social equity thing was kind of interesting now. A change there. Added a bunch of more communities.
From the Marijuana Regulatory Agency for Michigan's program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There still needs to be a push to get localities and their policies when they choose to adopt them to kind of expand on that a little bit. I mean, like, as they did in Ypsilanti. They should definitely do that in Detroit. I mean,
it's still a huge hurdle, you know, these local ordinances. I don't trust Detroit's going to get it done right.
What's the latest on Detroit, Tom?
Matt's working on a draft of the ballot. We got to get it done before July. We need your help.
yeah, there's nothing sensible, and this will even be challenged and hard to implement but there's nothing
Yeah.
sensible that's going to come out of the council themselves. I mean, there's been years of this now. It's just ridiculous. There's
In
no reason
fact,
to believe they're
George
going to get their shit
Effred,
together.
who was in the planning department there, now he's running for the House of Representatives. He's always been pretty reasonable as a city worker in the planning department. He said he saw the draft. Nobody's seen the draft, but he saw the draft. No micro businesses, no consumption lounges.
Fuck that. That's the city of Detroit. Those are great opportunities, man.
Yeah.
You want to really make Detroit a tourist hub. You have casinos. You have all kinds of you have Canada
Put a
right
fucking
there.
social lounge at a casino.
You need consumption lounges
Rather
to
have,
attract people.
rather have bars and people fighting and, you know, getting in accidents. You know, bars are more, you know, court worthy. You know, more bars, there's more crime, you know.
Hey, Berg, anything else, man? We're going to start winding down. I really appreciate having you on. You're welcome to jump in and co-host with us anytime. We had Roach for, I think, a split second, and then that didn't last that long, but you guys are welcome anytime. Been really enjoying going on Medical Mondays, 9 o'clock Mondays.
Yeah.
Been cool.
Check out last night's episode too. It was a really cool
it was Memorial Day
episode.
And a veteran with a moving testimonial was on there. It is a great one.
What's it called?
Medical Mondays. And you know, and it's a long lasting, or you know, it's got longevity in this world of podcasts. It's,
Berg,
one of the originals.
Where can we find it online?
It's Medical Mondays podcast on YouTube.
Yep. Obviously, and then we also have Planet Green Trees Thursday, Planet Green Trees TV Thursdays at 8 o'clock, and Reeds and Weeds. That's been coming on kind of sporadic times, and us, and you can see Colin on all of them all the time.
Not all the time, but maybe Medical Mondays and Jazz Cabbage Cafe the most.
What?
Yes. Yep.
So, you guys are my favorite.
Sorry. Hey, Colin, you're up, man. What do you have going on? Anything with DNA or anything else happening?
Do we have anything, Jim?
We're looking for testimonials.
Yeah,
if resident, especially to give us testimonials about their experiences and
help with medical conditions potentially, or improvement of life at large, or that kind of thing.
Entheogenic plants, right?
Yeah.
I know the Michigan Psychedelic Society is having a storytelling Zoom meeting on, I think it's June 21st. It's the third Saturday of the month from 6 to 8.
Hey, you know what? You guys just recently put on a Zoom thing, and we're kind of running tight, but I guess the world's not going to explode if we go over a couple minutes. About having groups, helping groups who would like to do a local initiative in their city, their area that they're in. So that's available. People could still contact you or Julie or Jim and get some more information on that. Is that correct?
Definitely. I know that we already have started groups, I think, in Grand Rapids for sure, and maybe like Lansing area.
Hey man, we should do that in Detroit too. Same time getting signatures for the other thing. Look at that, Tom's into that. I can tell by the expression on his face. It's like somebody poked him in the belly button for a second.
From Oregon, Colorado, from Chicago.
Hey Jim, anything else on top of that?
June 14th, DJ Short will be at Home of Medicine.
Oh yeah.
Home of Medicine's also extending their hours until 8 p.m. on Sundays now. I think it's going to be 12 to 8 on Sundays. So look out for that. They do curbside pickup there too. But back to the DJ Short thing, that's for PCAP, which is Prisoners Creative Arts Project.
Right.
For art supplies and whatnot for prisoners that are incarcerated for drug offenses and whatnot. But that's where all the proceeds for that event will go, and it starts at 4:20 on 6/14.
All right.
Nice.
Hey Rick, you got anything to wrap up with? Derek, I'm going to assume that you don't have much going on, by the way.
Yeah.
I do. I would like to add shout out to John Schickler, Colleen Keys, Ricky Campo, Adam Brook. Thanks for tuning in. Lauren Gauci.
And I'll say
champions.
Adam Brook is collecting something called Cannabis Confessions. You go on his Facebook page, you can find a link to that. You can download your Cannabis Confessions to his site, and he will do whatever wicked thing Adam decides to do with it.
Mr.
I'll
Hash
just
Bash. Yep.
I'll just say that there are so many sources of information for cannabis consumers right now. I've got magazines I subscribe to for free, and they send them to me all the time. If you really want to stay up on the industry, the ability is there for you. It's all based on your desire and the ability for you to kick ass. And I think we all can still kick ass despite COVID. So I expect to see a lot more people accomplishing things and less people bitching about shit.
Nice.
That's my word.
Well, that's a good word to end on, man. It's great having everybody. Tom, great to have you. It was great to have Toni and Mark, everybody here today, Berg and Jim and Colin and Rick,
Good to
Derek. Thanks a lot, you guys. It was another good one, man. These have been turning out pretty good. Appreciate it. It's fun.
Good to see
We'll be back next week, and check out Berg on Monday at 9 o'clock.
Thanks, Phil Vasquez, for the wonderful mask.
Yeah.